Everyone, I'm Gaiutra. I'm going to be reading from my book, Coolie Woman. It was inspired by my great-grandmother who traveled from Calcutta to British Guyana in 1903. Her name was Sujaria. She was 27, and she was 4 months pregnant, traveling alone without a husband by her side when she sailed. She was like a lot of the women who left India as indentured servants. About 250,000 of them left. They were called coolies by the British. And about 70% of them were just like my great-grandmother. They were traveling without husbands. So I'm going to read one, maybe two sections. You'll tell me how I'm doing on time. But I tried to tell as many of the stories of the women as I could, not just my great-grandmothers. The one you'll hear today is about a woman named Maharani. She was Trinidadian, and I actually heard her story right here in this building. Dr. Pat Mohammed interviewed her in the 80s, and the tape of the interview is right here in this building. So, okay, this first section is set in Calcutta, in a neighborhood called Garden Reach, which is where the immigrant depots were located and where the immigrants waited for ships to take them to a new world. I tried to imagine my great-grandmother in this setting, preparing to board the Clyde in 1903. How did she ever get to this point of departure, surrounded by so many fragmented families and outcasts, bearing secrets and unstated loss? Did she look back over her shoulder as she boarded the ship? Was there regret in her glance? I don't know, because she didn't say. But I do know the story of one woman who had no regrets when she left Garden Reach in 1916. Maharani could not remember her parents' names by the time she told her story, in a voice frail with age. She was a child when they died. They weren't there for her wedding to a much older man, whose name she couldn't remember either. Maharani was 5 when she got married, and she was still just a child, only 12, when widowed. Soon after, her brother-in-law took her to a magistrate's office, where, too young to know any better, she ceded the rights to her inheritance from her husband. For 8 years after his death, she cooked and cleaned for her in-laws, bearing their beatings for minor mishaps, much like the one that ultimately triggered her journey to Trinidad. She left literally over spilled milk. Maharani had just boiled milk for her in-laws when a cat crept up to lick the pot. She pelted the cat fell over, and the pot capsized. Anticipating another thrashing, and suddenly unwilling to accept one, she slipped out while her in-laws were eating. In 1987, Maharani explained why she fled. I said I'm gonna beat me because I'm getting too much licks. I said I'm gonna beat me. Well, I run, and I tell nobody I'm leaving. On the road, later that night, she met a man with 1 foot at a well. When he heard her predicament, he offered to help. Did she want a job on an island where she could make 25 cents a day? All she would have to do, he claimed, is sift sugar. Did she want to go? Maharani said yes, she did want to go. She would go. Minna had nothing, she said, recalling how at 20, she calculated the costs and benefits of leaving India. I come way, Minna have nothing. As her boat was anchored in the Hooghly River, another ship pulled in, bringing home Indians who had finished their indentures. They clamored to portholes to warn the immigrants staring back out of their own portholes. From a distance, the repatriates shook their hands, gesturing for the immigrants not to go. But it was too late for anyone to heed that message. This was the point when the umbilical cord connecting the immigrants to India was presumably cut. Several survivors of indenture, and the rare accounts that describe the severing, mention weeping. They conjure a scene of breastbeating and wailing as the ship embarked. But Maharani did not cry, nor did she remember sounds of sorrow. She remembered drumbeats. Looking back across the span of 7 decades, she described how her jahajis, her shipmates, played drums provided by the crew, and how they sang and danced during the journey. then bringing happy. Them ain't bringing no trouble, then bringing happy. Nobody to study nothing. That's why them bringing happy. There was nobody to make her study a single thing. Nobody to cause her grief or worry. No brother-in-law to cheat her, no mother-in-law to beat her. Nobody, she thought, to make her tremble in fear any longer. But should Maharani have been so convinced that no one would cause her grief anymore? The warning by the repatriates, as her ship got ready to leave the Hooghly, was ominous. Might they have been warning about the voyage itself to begin with? Indenture vessels were, after all, crossing in the wake of slavers with their well-documented horrors, from tragic mortality rates to the rape of women. 5 minutes? Okay, this second section is set on the seas, and it's based on my analysis of 77 indenture voyages from Calcutta to the Caribbean. Whenever a ship docked, the chief immigration agent at its destination had to report on its passage from India. Some of these dispatches, including the one detailing my great-grandmother's voyage, have been destroyed. Those that survive pull back the screen, if only for brief moments and partial views, on the lives of the women aboard. It is hard in these glimpses to escape the angle of sexual exploitation by figures of all ranks and races. In these archives of misconduct, the women appear resisting advances, or giving in to them, or in the eyes of many ship officials, courting them. But the records also provide other views of the women, on deathbeds, giving birth, losing children, going mad, being driven to suicide, engaged in infanticide, rejecting or being rejected by shipboard husbands, demanding that husbands prove themselves, stowing away, crying, cursing, possibly in love, and clearly in anguish. I cannot imagine that the journey was anything but a saga, even for immigrants whose lives aboard passed relatively without incident. Seasickness afflicted most. A majority fell ill with mumps, measles, dysentery, hookworm, or fever. The ache for home was so sharp that one ship surgeon declared, "I know that many die from nostalgia pure and simple. The excitement of the newness of everything keeps them up for a time, but soon dies away, and is followed by depression when they realize what they have done." The realization must have dawned slowly as the sea lengthened and the conditions aboard affected them one by one. As blankets rough as jute, sometimes rotten and foul-smelling, caused pus to form on children. As the fans for circulating air were shut down at night when most needed. As the condenser to make the water potable broke, which it routinely did. And as the floor beneath them sweated. All the while, surgeons prepared their balance sheets of births and deaths, recording Shiva's unending dance without realizing it. The Hindu god who destroys in order to create, who dances in a ring of flames to maintain the universe's ceaseless cycle of creation and destruction, did not forget the cargo hold. I'm referring to something far more metaphysical than mortality or birth rates. Here, a woman born on a ship to the West Indies in 1888. On that mad ocean, when all was tossing, people's heads were spinning, and then labor pains started for Ma to have her child. On that mad ocean, I was born. On that mad ocean, I came to life. She was describing her own origins. But with her incantatory words, she could have been telling the creation story of our people, mine and hers. She could have continued in her voice of myth. In our beginning, there was a boat. On that mad ocean, we came to life. We passed the Black Sea to reach the Red. The water was blue before it was green, and then it was mud. We crossed 7 seas, 7 shades of water, shades of darkness and light. Light that died and darkness that was born. Darkness somehow extinguished and light rekindled. The captain's wheel became Shiva's fiery circle, turning and turning in its cosmic spiral. And in the gyrating of the gales and the churning of the waves, as one steered and the other danced, we became new. The moorings of castes had loosened, and people who had left behind uncles, sisters, husbands, and mothers substituted shipmates, their jahajis, for kin. Unraveled, they began, ever so slowly, to spin the threads of a novel identity. Indenture ships were not slave ships. But there can be no denying a few ties that should have bound the 3 million Africans trafficked by the British as slaves, and the 1 million Indians transported as coolies. The people in the hold in both cases were cut from the same demographic, mainly young and overwhelmingly male. Women were in short supply and subject to sexual exploitation during both crossings. And both journeys were transformative, signaling a break with the past, making whatever came before seem almost as unimaginable to later generations as time and space before the Big Bang. In the beginning, there was a boat. Having emerged from its belly as survivors, the indentured Indians could no longer be who they had been. Like the slaves before them, they were an entirely new people, forged by suffering, created through destruction. In this sense, above all else, theirs was a middle passage, marked by brutal reinvention. How do I even begin to situate my great-grandmother in this odyssey? If I draw an imaginary line from moment to moment on the ships, from glimpse to glimpse of women aboard, will her shape emerge constellation-like? Could the wrong shape emerge if I connect the wrong moments to each other? How do I know which are right? Will her constellation give off light? Thank you.